Hi, it's Larry King, and you're watching Coping with COVID. It's a series brought to you by the positivevoices.com and the International Positive Psychology Association. Our co-host is Dr. James Pawelski, professor at the University of Pennsylvania Positive Psychology Center and founding executive director of the International Positive Psychology Association. We hope that these get-togethers help you better understand yourself and what's going on in the world. James, what's today?
Well, Larry, first of all, hi, it's good to see you. Love the hat, looking great. Today we have a very special guest. As you mentioned, we're teaming up with the International Positive Psychology Association. Today we have the president of that association with us today. Dr. Judith Moskowitz is a professor of medical social sciences at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. She's trained as a social psychologist. She's an expert on stress, emotion, and coping. And her current program of research is focused on testing a program of positive emotion skills to help people cope with health-related and other types of life stress. So she's going to be a great guest for our conversation today.
Dr. Moskowitz, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going right into the first question. You work with people in high stress, Dr. Moskowitz. Who are these people?
So yeah, our research is with people experiencing all kinds of life stress. So we've studied people experiencing health-related stress, like diagnosis with a serious illness, type 2 diabetes, breast cancer. We studied people with depressive symptoms, basically humans, because everyone's experiencing some kind of stress.
Dr. Henry King Stanford, an old friend of mine, was president of the University of Miami, and he told me once that basically stress is a good thing. People who have it overcome it. It's not a negative.
Well, I mean, I think that can certainly be true. Life would be very uninteresting, and we wouldn't appreciate the good things if we didn't have some negative or some stress in our lives. That said, I don't know that I would prescribe stress to people to make them tougher. That goes a little far. I think life provides us with enough difficulties on its own without seeking it out.
What have you learned from the people you work with?
So, a number of things. Primarily that people can experience positive events in the midst of stress, and that you can develop the skill of having more positive emotion, and that can help you cope better with whatever you have to cope with.
So Judy, these are obviously very important research areas and lessons for today. So can you kind of bring that home for what folks are experiencing today with the pandemic?
Yeah, so I mean, my work started in the early 1990s, and I was studying caregivers of their partners with AIDS. And this was prior to the more effective treatments for AIDS. So it was essentially a terminal illness. So we were studying people who were experiencing some of the most extreme stress that humans can experience, having a loved one get sick and then die. And we learned a lot from those caregivers that I think applies to today and any kind of stress. Things like, even though they were distressed and it was really stressful, they were also able to experience moments of positive emotion, and they actually wanted to talk about it. In the middle of the study, the caregivers, the participants asked us, because we were only asking about stressful events, because that was our lens going into it. You know, what's stressful about caregiving? How are you coping with it? And they said, you're not asking us about the good things. So we started asking them about the good things, not really expecting to get a lot. And it was amazing that in 99% of the time of the interviews, the caregivers could talk about something positive that happened in the past week, even if their partner had just died. They wanted to talk about the good things that were happening. So I think, that lesson, seeing that those caregivers could cope with that kind of life stress using positive emotion and being able to talk about positive events, that those skills can apply to any kind of stress, including the current stress that we're all experiencing with COVID.
So Larry, I want to bring this back to your life, because you've overcome some really amazing health challenges in your life and continued to work for decades after that. What was it about your mindset, do you think, that helped you to overcome that negative stress and to get back in the saddle?
One of my doctors, I have like 7 doctors, because I've had everything you could possibly have, Judy. You haven't missed a trick. And I'm 86 years old, and I've had everything you could have. And one of my doctors called, he said, I have indomitable spirit. And he thought that indomitable, whatever it is, indomitable spirit kept me going. All my life, I get up off the floor. So while I've had illness, I never let it take away from me. In other words, I had a heart attack, I recovered, I had everything you can get, I've got. So all right, my answer is indomitable spirit.
So Judy,
you understand that?
So Judy, so how does that connect to your research? Have you studied indomitable spirit?
I can't say I've studied indomitable spirit specifically, worded that way, but what it sounds to me is that Larry sort of dispositionally is resilient and continues on. What we try to do with our program of research is teach people ways to be more like Larry, to have more of that indomitable spirit.
Can you teach it?
Can you teach it? Oh, absolutely, you can teach it. We teach a set of skills that if you do them, you'll have more positive emotion, and that will help you cope better with whatever you have to cope with.
So is the first skill wearing suspenders? Is that the part of it that really...
That's number one, yeah.
Why did you choose psychology as a living, Judy?
Why did I choose that? Well, I'm a researcher. I'm a social psychologist, not a clinician. So I don't perform therapy. But I was always fascinated by the mind-body connection and the evidence that how we think about things and our emotional reactions have effects on our physical health and certainly our longer-term psychological well-being. So I've always been fascinated with that. So I was lucky enough to land a job where I get paid to study what I love.
One of my favorite psychologists is William James, also a philosopher. And one of my favorite quotations from him is, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." And it sounds to me like both your research over the decades, but also currently, you're suggesting that we pay attention to what we're careful about what we attend to. But how would you respond to somebody who says that's just pie in the sky or wishful thinking? You've got to focus on the tragedy, the pandemic. This is awful, right, and you can't focus on anything else.
I would say, to some extent, both of those statements are true. Humans evolved to pay attention to negative things. That's negative emotions focus us on what's wrong and what we need to do about it. So that's important. So, by saying that you can look at the good things that are happening, or you can practice these skills to have positive emotion, I'm not telling you that you shouldn't experience negative emotion or that you should ignore that things are really bad or pretend that it's not there or suppress your negative emotions. Instead, what we found, in our research, starting with the caregivers, is that you can experience the positive emotions alongside the negative. So they were certainly depressed and distressed and anxious and fearful and all those negative things associated with having a loved one die. But they were able to experience the positive alongside that. And those who were able to experience more of the positive emotion actually did better in the end and were able to cope better with the stress.
If you're happy, can you live longer?
There's actually evidence that that is the case, yes. Yeah, there's a number of studies that have shown it. My favorite was actually a study of nuns where the researchers had copies of these autobiographies that the nuns wrote as they were going into the convent. So they were like 19, 20 years old, and they were asked to write just a page, sort of a little autobiography of their life so far and why they decided to become a nun. And the researchers took these narratives and analyzed them for positive emotion content, also negative emotion, and something called lexical complexity, which is related to IQ, which is also related to longevity. And what they found was that the women who had more positive emotion in those narratives that they wrote at the age of 19 were much more likely to be alive at age 90. And that was independent of how much negative emotion they had. It was independent of their IQ. The positive emotion seemed to be the thing that was driving their longevity.
Jane?
Well, that's a relief, Larry. I thought Judy was going to tell us that to have longevity, you had to be a nun. And that
Right.
pretty much leaves you and me out of it.
That helps too.
So Judy, when we were talking earlier about the skills that you teach folks to be able to practice resilience and so forth, we were joking about the suspenders, but can you tell us a little bit more about those skills? Like, what do we need to develop?
Yeah, so we have a package of about 8 of them that we teach people. We'll teach them 1 or 2 during the week and then have them practice it. And then they come back the next week and we teach them another one, sort of try to help them sort of build these skills and have, tools in their toolbox. So they're things like noticing positive events and savoring them, gratitude, mindful awareness and non-judgment, positive reappraisal or sort of seeing the bright side of things, attainable goals, acts of kindness, and noticing your personal strengths.
What is mindfulness? Why is it so important and helpful? What does it mean?
So mindfulness is the ability to pay attention to what's happening in the moment, your feelings, your experiences, without judging, sort of in a nutshell. It helps so you're not, you can really be in the moment. You're not rehashing what just happened a minute ago, or, I flubbed that answer, so I'm gonna ruminate on it. It also helps that you're not rehearsing what's coming up next. You are in the moment and experiencing whatever you're experiencing and not judging yourself for it. So not saying, well, I'm feeling anxious. I'm a terrible person because I'm anxious. Why can't I do this? I'm feeling anxious. So it can be really helpful, particularly in the context of stress, in that you don't get wrapped up and sort of spiral with the stress. You're just in the moment. You can pay attention to your breath, and it can really help you then maybe notice something positive that's going on, which again then can help you cope better.
Sounds like, Judy, this might be connected with the research that you've done on the stories people tell ourselves, or we all tell ourselves. Why is it important for us to be in control of the narrative of our own lives?
Yeah, I think of the skills I just mentioned, that the stories that we tell ourselves applies most to the skill of positive reappraisal. So an appraisal is your interpretation of something that's happening to you, your interpretation of it in terms of its consequences for your well-being. So 2 people can experience the exact same event, and one will interpret it or appraise it as harmful, and one will appraise it as not important. And the person appraising it as harmful is going to have negative emotions, and it's going to be stressful for them, whereas the other person won't. So the example I always use is 2 people are waiting for a bus, and the bus is late. And the first person is on her way to work, and if she's late to work, she's going to be fired. So the consequences of that late bus for her are serious, and she's going to feel a lot of negative emotion. Whereas the other person who's also waiting for the same bus is, I don't know, going to the beach for the day. So if she's a little late, it doesn't matter. So she's not feeling the stress the way the first person is because of that same late bus. So it's a difference in how the stories that they're telling themselves about this. The first person's, this late bus means I'm going to be fired from my job. And the second person is saying, this late bus means I have a few more minutes to finish listening to my podcast.
So what is the most surprising thing you found in the research you've done?
I shouldn't be surprised by this because I'm the one doing the studies, but I'm constantly amazed when the study works. So when we're able to teach people these skills, they learn them, they practice them, and they have more positive emotion. It surprises me every time. It shouldn't, but it does.
Setting goals important.
Yes, absolutely. Setting goals, attainable goals, that's one of the skills that we teach. And the science behind this is that even seeing progress toward a goal gives you a hit of positive emotion. So if you're a list maker and you notice that when you cross that thing off your list, you feel a little jolt of happiness. I am definitely a list maker. As we've been isolating at home with my family, I've got 2 kids, 17 and 21, or 22. So not young kids so I don't have to homeschool them. But every morning I send on the family group text my goals for the day. And they're really simple. It's like get outside twice, fill in 6 pieces of that puzzle we're all working on. So every morning I send that out, and it makes, they don't respond, but it makes me feel better that here's my list for the day. And then when I cross something off, I feel better, and it helps me differentiate the days and get through to the next one.
So Judy, I'd like to follow up with asking you more about your own experience. In my role as the founding executive director of the International Positive Psychology Association, I've been able to work closely with you over a number of years in your role as the president of that association. And I know you have all kinds of stress with that work, with your research, as a wife, as a mother. And yet I have to say, every time I talk with you, you are calm, you're collected, you're wise. So what are you've just given us one tip about what you do. What else do you do to make sure that you don't burn out and that you continue to support your well-being?
Well, apparently I'm a good actress, because you think I'm calm all the time. So that's number one, be a good actress. No, seriously. So I think, when I think about it, the one skill, and I didn't mention this one as part of our package of 8, but it is something that we teach sort of implicitly across everything, and that's self-compassion. And that's, understanding that certainly in this current moment for all of us, it is really stressful and it's really hard. And cutting yourself some slack, sort of being like, I'm having a really awful day and I'm not productive at all. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Like, it's okay. Everyone's suffering. Everyone is, to different degrees. Everyone has to deal with this. It's okay if you're not perfect and you're not, taking on a new skill or writing a book or whatever it is people say they're doing while they're sheltering at home. But I think that's the biggest one for me, that I've been relying on a lot lately, is just self-compassion.
Where do you see with what's going on now, do you see the future of caregiving picking up?
Yeah, so, well, I think we don't, for caregiving, our work has been in caregivers with Alzheimer's and dementia, and then the AIDS caregivers early on in the AIDS epidemic. With COVID, I think we don't know what the long-term consequences might be, and that it might require more sort of family caregivers to step up and create a new type of stress that we didn't have previously.
What is IPPA doing right now, your association?
So yeah, IPPA is putting together a number of resources that you can access through our website. So we're bringing together, we're an organization of psychologists and practitioners and people who apply the science of positive psychology. And we're sharing also amongst ourselves resources for helping each other cope with this. So I think, we're helping ourselves as an organization, and we're also offering what we know and offering our science out to others as well.
Judy, can you leave us with a helpful tip overall, we've talked about helpful tip on stress.
Yeah, I think a really easy one is to notice the positive events. And there's always something. Like I said, the AIDS caregivers really taught us this early on, that despite the fact that their partner was incredibly sick or had just died, they were able to find something positive in their day. And it often didn't have anything to do with caregiving or their partner. It had to do with, I had this really great cup of coffee. It sounds kind of silly in some ways, but if you can just take a moment and notice that, oh, wow, the sun's out today. So I'm in Chicago and the sun has not been out today, and I'm not happy about that. So when the sun does come out, I am always really appreciative of that, and make a point to note it. And then related to that, to noticing positive events, is savoring them. So it's revisiting them later. It's telling someone about it. It's putting it in your journal. It's putting it on social media. It gives you an opportunity to re-experience that positive emotion. Again, even though it's just a small thing, it doesn't have to be, winning the lottery, or, they developed a vaccine for COVID and we're all going to be fine and get out tomorrow. Like, that's not going to happen. But there are positive things happening all the time. And if you can take a moment to notice them, it can really help you cope then going forward.
Judy, you've been terrific. James?
Thank you so much, Judy. It's been terrific to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Doctor. All right, James, what do we take away from today's session?
Well, Larry, it was a real treat to have the president of the International Positive Psychology Association with us today. For those who might be interested in finding out more about IPA, they can go to ipanetwork.org. And find out a lot of information. And as Judy mentioned, it's a global association that is sharing resources, supporting research, and supporting the practice of the science of resilience and well-being. A few things that really struck me about what Judy said, Larry, first of all, was just self-compassion. And as the thing that she identified as being particularly helpful to her. And I think that's a really important one to focus in on, because we do kind of hold ourselves to, well, I should be doing more. I should be, like she said, I should be writing a novel or something. And some days it's just hard to get anything done. So being okay with that is really important. I think another thing is understanding that even on those days when things are particularly difficult, there are moments that we can tap into, moments of times when we can feel grateful. The mindfulness she talked about, the importance of having goals. And I'm thinking again, Larry, of your career, when again, you overcame so many of these health issues that you had, and your indomitable spirit, that didn't make it easy, I'm sure. That didn't make the problems go away, but it gave you a way to continue to move forward in spite of them. Is that right?
Correct. You hit the nail on the head.
So
I'm having fun with these sessions, James.
Say that again, Larry?
I'm having fun with these sessions.
I'm having a ton of fun too, Larry. It's great to talk with you. And I guess the bottom line thing we all have to remember, you heard it from the president of the International Positive Psychology Association herself, the #1 key to indomitable spirit: suspenders.
You got it. Thanks, James.
Take care, Larry. Great to see you.